publicly humiliated me at an expensive restaurant on her birthday, called me pathetic in front of her wealthy friends, then walked out, leaving me with an $847 tab for 15 people. As she left, she announced loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "A guy like you should be grateful I even dated you." I sat there alone, paid the bill while strangers watched, and walked home through downtown feeling completely destroyed. But that humiliation became the catalyst for the most satisfying and methodical revenge I've ever executed. Here's the full story. And trust me, it gets wild. I'd been dating Ashley for 2 years. She came from serious money, trust fund, baby, connected family, the whole privileged package. Her dad owned investment properties across 3 states. Her mom did charity work as a hobby, and Ashley herself worked at a prestigious consulting firm downtown. I'm a regular guy, work as a high school math teacher, make decent money, but nothing compared to her social circle. Her crew was exactly what you'd expect from rich kids who never worked for anything real. Madison with her diamond tennis bracelets and surgical precision insults, always dripping in what looked like actual diamonds wrapped around her wrists like tiny handcuffs made of sparkle. She gave off this vibe like she was doing you a favor just by acknowledging your existence. Then there's Preston, who inherited Daddy's real estate empire and loved humble bragging about his little side projects, which involved buying buildings and acting surprised when they made him money. Candace sat there wrapped in silk designer everything, looking like she was perpetually auditioning for the role of mysterious rich woman in a movie nobody would want to watch. Tyler called every service worker champ, like he was some benevolent sports coach instead of a guy whose biggest accomplishment was inheriting his dad's investment firm. And Sophia, constantly angling her phone to catch the perfect candid moment because nothing existed unless it was documented for her Instagram followers. This woman treated real life like content waiting to be curated. The relationship had massive red flags I ignored because I genuinely thought I was lucky to be with someone so successful and connected. Ashley would make jokes about my appearance, calling me endearingly ugly in front of people, which sounds like a compliment until you realize you're hearing it in front of strangers. She'd comment on my clothes from Target with this fake concern about how earnest they looked, mention my 10-year-old Honda with little sighs about budget transportation, and describe my modest apartment as charmingly minimalist, in a tone that made it clear she thought it was just sad. Every insult came with that practiced little laugh that was supposed to make it okay, like she was just being playfully honest instead of systematically destroying my self-esteem. I told myself she was just particular, maybe a little high maintenance, that I wasn't sophisticated enough for her world yet, but could learn to fit in if I tried hard enough. Classic manipulation sufferer thinking. I was so focused on being worthy of her attention that I never stopped to ask whether her attention was actually worth having. The financial manipulations started small and escalated gradually over 2 years. It began with emergency wire transfers to her account when her friend's event planning business was supposedly about to go under. $5,000 labeled emergency contribution that actually helped pay for ice sculptures shaped like swans at a party that cost more than most people's weddings. Then came fancy dinners at places I couldn't afford because she needed to network with potential clients. Spa days charged to my credit card because she had to look professional for important meetings. $400 sessions that she documented on Instagram, getting champagne facials with Sophia while I thought she was preparing for work presentations. Designer clothes purchases got labeled as work wardrobe investments because she needed to dress for the job she wanted, not the job she had. Luxury car rentals for weekends became necessary for client meetings, except the Instagram posts showed her wine tasting in Napa with Madison and Candace. No clients in sight. Every expense came with a perfectly reasonable story that made it sound temporary, necessary, like I was investing in both our futures together. The beautiful thing about people who live for appearances is that they document everything. Ashley's social media presence was like a detailed confession of every lie she'd told me. The work emergency spa day happened on a Tuesday when she posted 17 Instagram stories of herself getting champagne treatments with Sophia, laughing about retail therapy. The client dinner I funded showed photos of 20 people doing bottle service while I was across town at a mandatory work training, thinking she was having a quiet business meal. I was hemorrhaging money but convinced myself it was all temporary, that once she got the promotion or landed the big client or whatever goal she was working toward, things would balance out. Classic financial misuse pattern. The sufferer keeps believing the investment will pay off eventually. that the sacrifices are building towards something better. That birthday dinner was the breaking point, where her mask finally slipped completely. The restaurant was pure pretension. Lumiere with marble floors that probably cost more than my car, champagne bubble light fixtures because subtlety isn't really a thing when you're trying to remind everyone how much money you have, and the kind of hushed atmosphere where every conversation felt like a performance for the other diners. Ashley's crew was already assembled when I arrived, looking like they'd been posed by some sadistic lifestyle photographer specializing in privileged a-hole tableau. They'd saved me the seat at the end of the table, not because I was late, but because that's where they put me every single time, the symbolic end of the table, like I'd been seated there on purpose to remind everyone of my place in their social hierarchy. Ashley made her entrance 20 minutes after the reservation time, because punctuality is for peasants, apparently. She swept in with practiced elegance perfected over years of making sure everyone notices when she arrives. The air kiss she planted near my cheek was so precisely calculated it could have been choreographed. Not too intimate, not too distant, just enough to acknowledge my existence without actually having to touch me. "Looking good, ugly," she announced as I stood to pull out her chair, her voice carrying just enough volume to make sure the entire table heard her little pet name for me. The laughter that followed wasn't the warm, inclusive kind you hope for at birthday dinners. It was that sharp, glittery sound rich people make when they're enjoying someone else's discomfort at a safe distance. That's when the real show started, because apparently, my birthday gift to Ashley wasn't the carefully chosen present I'd wrapped, or the white lilies I'd brought because she'd mentioned once, months ago, that lilies make any room feel expensive. No, my gift was serving as the evening's entertainment, the designated punching bag for a group of overgrown trust fund babies who'd turned passive aggression into an art form. "Oh my God, Julian, is that Ty from Target?" Madison asked, her voice dripping with fake concern that makes you want to throw your drink in someone's face. "It's so earnest." "Nothing wrong with budget-friendly fashion," Preston chimed in because he'd never met a moment he couldn't make worse. "Shows real character, real men who didn't need to grow up with daddy's money, right, Julian?" The right Julian part was my favorite touch. Like I was supposed to thank him for the compliment wrapped in condescension. Tyler raised his glass then, that crap-eating grin spreading across his face like he was about to deliver the punchline to the world's longest setup. "Here's to freedom and finer things," he declared, making direct eye contact with me. "And to friends who know the difference." They all drank to that, even Ashley, especially Ashley. I sat there cutting my overpriced steak and wondering when exactly I'd become the designated entertainment for this group of people who treated cruelty like a competitive sport. Every joke landed like a small knife, precise and practiced. They'd clearly done this before, maybe not to me specifically, but to someone. There's always someone at the bottom of the social food chain, and tonight that someone was me. The worst part was watching other diners at nearby tables starting to notice. Conversations gradually died down. Subtle glances in our direction. These people weren't just humiliating me privately. They were doing it with an audience, turning my embarrassment into dinner theater for strangers who were probably wondering what I'd done to deserve such treatment. When the bill arrived, Jesus Christ, 3 pages long. It landed in front of me like it had never occurred to anyone else that they might be expected to pay for their own meals. 3 pages of itemized extravagance, bottles of wine that cost more than my monthly groceries, appetizers I didn't even know existed, desserts with names I couldn't pronounce. Ashley slid it across the table with the casual indifference you'd use to pass a used napkin. No discussion, no, should we split this? No acknowledgement that maybe the birthday girl could contribute to her own celebration. Then came the eliminate shot. "A guy like you should be grateful I even dated you," she said, her voice pitched loud enough to carry to the neighboring tables. The words hit like a slap, delivered with surgical precision in front of an audience of strangers who were now definitely watching our little drama unfold. She stood then, gathering her entourage like some socialite Pied Piper, leaving behind nothing but the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the echo of their laughter as they swept out of the restaurant. I sat there alone, staring at a bill that represented more money than I usually spent in 2 months, surrounded by empty chairs and the judgment of people I'd never see again. I paid it. Not because I'm weak, though I'm sure that's how it looked to anyone watching. Not because I thought it was fair or right or reasonable. I paid it because in that moment, I needed quiet more than I needed justice. I needed space to think, to breathe. to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. Instead of calling an Uber, I walked 37 blocks home through downtown, past late-night food trucks serving actual humans instead of whatever pretentious nonsense we'd been eating at the Marble Mausoleum. Past the bodega, where Mrs. Chen always asks if I'm eating enough, past the dive bar, where people laugh at jokes instead of at each other. Real places where a 3-page dinner bill would cause actual heart attacks instead of casual shrugs. Every step replayed her words. A guy like you should be grateful I even dated you. The phrase had this weird rhythm to it, like she'd practiced it. Like she'd been saving it up for just the right moment when she'd have the perfect audience to witness my destruction. And you know what? It worked. Those words followed me down every block, echoing off the buildings until they stopped sounding like an insult and started sounding like clarity. Because here's the thing about walking 37 blocks with someone's cruelty playing on repeat in your head. Eventually it stops hurting and starts teaching. Every step was sharpening something inside me that I didn't even know had gotten dull. 2 years of making excuses for her behavior, of telling myself she was just particular or high maintenance, of accepting that maybe I really wasn't good enough for her world. But walking gives you perspective. And perspective was telling me that a woman who could humiliate her boyfriend in public for sport wasn't particular. She was just mean. Rich mean, which somehow makes it worse because it's so goddamn unnecessary. When I finally got home, the first thing I saw were those white lilies I'd brought her, sitting abandoned on my kitchen counter like forgotten soldiers. I filled the vase with water because even rejected flowers deserve better than dying of thirst, and arranged them carefully. They were still beautiful, even if they'd been dismissed along with everything else about my pathetic attempt to belong in her world. Then I did something I'd never done before. I grabbed a sticky note, wrote $847.32 in blue ink, and stuck it right on my bathroom mirror where I'd see it every morning. Not because I'm masochistic, but because I needed a reminder, a daily dose of reality about exactly what it cost to play along with Ashley's games. That's when the real math started. Not the restaurant bill math. That was just one night's worth of damage. I'm talking about the 2-year calculation of what it actually cost to date someone who treated generosity like stupidity and kindness like weakness. I pulled out my laptop and started adding things up, and Jesus Christ, the numbers were worse than I'd thought. 2 years of jokes about my appearance because apparently I'm endearingly ugly, which sounds like a compliment until you realize you're hearing it in front of strangers. 2 years of casual comments about my job, my clothes, my car, my apartment, always delivered with that little laugh that was supposed to make it okay. 2 years of thinking that patience would somehow soften her edges, that if I just stuck around long enough, she'd realize I was worth keeping around for something other than comic relief and bill paying. I opened a folder on my desktop and started screenshotting text conversations where she mocked me to her friends, thinking I wouldn't see them. Saved receipts from all those times my credit card covered her emergency expenses. Downloaded bank statements showing transfers to her account labeled emergency that somehow always coincided with her wanting something expensive. The evidence was all there, like breadcrumbs leading back to a house made of financial misuse and emotional manipulation. I called the only 2 people I trust completely, my sister Emma and my friend Marcus. Emma picked up on the second ring because she's a pediatric nurse, and nurses don't sleep like normal people. Julian, what's wrong? No small talk, no pretense, just immediate concern, because that's who she is. It's time, I said simply. Time to stop apologizing for existing. She was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that means she's listening to everything I'm not saying, along with everything I am. What do you need? She asked finally. A witness, I said. Someone to remind me I'm not crazy. You're not crazy, she said immediately. You're just finally awake. Marcus was harder to wake up, but once I explained the situation, he was all business. You sure about this? He asked, and I could hear him already firing up his laptop in the background. I'm sure. I'm tired of being the punchline to her joke, I said. Good, he said, because I've been waiting 2 years for you to get pissed off enough to do something about it. Marcus showed up at my door the next morning looking like he'd raided a Best Buy clearance rack, old laptop under one arm, legal pad tucked under the other, and that expression he gets when he's about to dive deep into someone else's digital mess. The guy's a walking contradiction. Messy hair, wrinkled t-shirt, but a mind that organizes information like he's running some kind of human filing system. Coffee first or revenge first? He asked, settling into my kitchen chair like he planned to be there all day. Both, I said. But let's call it justice. Revenge sounds petty. He snorted. Dude, after what you told me last night, Petty would be keying her car. This is just accounting. We spread everything out on my kitchen table. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts I'd been shoving into a drawer because looking at them made my chest tight. 2 years of financial evidence that painted a pretty clear picture of how someone can systematically drain another person's resources while making them feel grateful for the privilege. Jesus, Julian, Marcus muttered, scrolling through my credit card statements. She charged spa days to your card. What kind of spa days cost $400? The kind where you get your conscience removed, apparently, I said, watching him cross-reference dates with his legal pad. The man takes notes like he's preparing for the bar exam. Neat handwriting, filling up page after page with timestamps, amounts, and locations. We spent the next 3 hours mapping what Marcus called the ecosystem. Every suspicious charge got cross-referenced with social media posts, geotag locations, and timestamps. It was like watching a magic trick in reverse, all the sleight of hand exposed, all the misdirection laid bare. The spa day that supposedly helped her prepare for difficult clients happened on a Tuesday when she posted 17 Instagram stories of herself getting champagne facials with Sophia. The work wardrobe investment that maxed out my credit card coincided perfectly with a shopping spree she documented in real time, trying on designer dresses while laughing about retail therapy. This one's my favorite, Marcus said, pointing to a particularly damning entry. Midnight room, 2:13 a.m., $467, your card. But look at the timestamp on her story. She'd posted herself doing shots with Tyler and Preston at exactly 2:15 a.m. The charge was labeled Midnight Room VIP Hold, which sounded official enough until you realized it was just Ashley buying rounds for her crew while I was home asleep, thinking she was having a quiet night in with Candace. Meanwhile, the restaurant manager from Lumiere called me personally. Mr. Martinez, I wanted to call personally to apologize, he said, and I could hear genuine discomfort in his voice. What happened at your table Saturday night? That's not the kind of experience we want any of our guests to have. Several members of our staff mentioned how uncomfortable they felt watching the situation unfold. The way you handled yourself with such grace under pressure didn't go unnoticed. He offered to send me a detailed receipt, which arrived 47 minutes later with the subject line, Lumiere itemized receipt, table 12, Saturday evening. Holy crap! The receipt was a thing of beauty. 3 pages of forensic detail that read like a crime scene report written in restaurant terminology. Every item was timestamped, every seat numbered, every modification documented with surgical precision. Madison in seat 3 had ordered 3 bottles of Cristal at $180 each, 20 minutes apart, which meant she'd been getting progressively drunker and more vicious as the evening wore on. Tyler in seat 9 had sent back a $60 steak for being too pink at 8:47 p.m., then sent the replacement back for being too well done at 9:23 p.m. before finally accepting a third attempt at 9:58 p.m. The man had turned ordering dinner into performance art. But the real masterpiece was seat 12, Ashley's command center. The receipt showed she'd approved something called a birthday tasting flight for the table at 8:15 p.m. A $340 add-on that included artisanal chocolates, premium champagne, and what appeared to be some kind of dessert course that involved gold leaf. Gold leaf because regular dessert wasn't expensive enough for her special day. I also reached out to Sarah, a former junior associate at Ashley's firm who'd been pushed out after Ashley took credit for her work. I'd found her crying in my kitchen one night, explaining how Ashley had presented Sarah's entire client strategy as her own innovation. How there was nothing she could do because who would believe the junior associate over the golden girl with connections? Sarah had quit the next week, but not before quietly documenting everything, because that's what smart people do when they're getting screwed. They keep records. If you ever wanted to tell the truth, I'll be wherever you feel safe, I texted her. She agreed to meet at the library with a folder that made Marcus's documentation look amateur. 2 years of emails, project files, meeting notes, all meticulously organized and cross-referenced. Ashley hadn't just stolen one project. She'd been systematically taking credit for junior staff work while positioning herself as the innovative thinker driving the firm's success. Ashley had 3 major events coming up that mattered most to her carefully constructed image. First, her family's annual birthday brunch where she got to play the successful daughter who'd figured out life and found herself a stable boyfriend. I'd been to 4 of these brunches, always seated next to her grandmother, who complimented me on being such a good influence on Ashley. The family loved me because I made Ashley seem grounded, responsible, mature. I was her human character reference. Second, her boss's charity mixer, the big annual event where all the firm's power players gathered to congratulate themselves on how philanthropic they were while writing off their donations as tax breaks. Ashley had been talking about this event for months, planning her outfit, her talking points, her social media strategy. It was her chance to shine in front of the people who controlled her career trajectory. Third, Sophia's podcast taping, Leveling Up, Becoming Her, because apparently Sophia had decided she was qualified to give life advice despite never having worked a day in her life. Ashley was going to be the featured guest in an episode about authentic relationships and finding your equal. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. At the family brunch, I brought my evidence in neat folders labeled with dates and locations. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would make me look like the crazy ex-boyfriend having a public meltdown. Just small, exact truths arriving in the right room at the right moment. I waited until after dessert, some elaborate thing involving rose petals and gold leaf, because of course it did. When Ashley's mother launched into her planned finale about family news and announcements, I stood up and handed copies down each side of the table like I was distributing communion wafers. Actually, I do have some family news to share, I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. These are just some documents I thought might interest everyone. Financial records, actually, from the past 2 years. The first page was the restaurant receipt from Saturday night. All 3 pages itemized down to the last overpriced olive. The second page showed a timeline of similar charges, each cross-referenced with social media posts that told a very different story than what I'd been told at the time. Page 3 was my personal favorite, a simple spreadsheet showing total amounts by category, with a running tally at the bottom that currently sat at $39,964. No commentary, no accusations, no emotional manipulation. Just paper with numbers and dates and facts that spoke louder than any speech I could have given. The silence that followed was the kind you usually only hear right before something very expensive breaks. Ashley's father's eyebrows had climbed halfway to his hairline. Her mother's jaw was working like she was chewing through steel. Tyler had actually stopped looking at his phone, which might have been a first. And Ashley? Ashley's perfect smile flickered like a light bulb about to burn out, then snapped back into place with the kind of effort that made her eye twitch. "You're being dramatic," she said finally, reaching across the table toward my wrist with a gesture that was probably supposed to look affectionate, but came across like someone trying to pet a potentially dangerous animal. I moved my arm away, gently but definitively. Not angry, not aggressive, just done. Ashley's grandmother was still reading, her ancient eyes moving slowly across each page like she was memorizing every detail. When she finished, she placed her weathered hand over mine and said one word that seemed to fill the entire conservatory. Enough. She wasn't talking to me. The fallout started that night. Ashley began calling at 10:41 p.m., right around the time Sophia posted that cryptic yikes story that disappeared faster than a decent man at one of Ashley's dinner parties. The calls continued until 6:23 a.m. 73 attempts from Ashley alone, plus 21 from her mother, 14 from her father, 18 from Tyler, 12 from Sophia. Even her boss called 3 times, which meant something significant had shifted in the corporate ecosystem. The voicemails were a journey through the stages of psychological breakdown. They started with confusion and anger. "Julian, what the hell did you do? My boss wants to see me first thing tomorrow, and he's asking questions about Sarah and some BS about stolen work." They escalated to threats. "You pathetic little worm. You think you can destroy my career because your feelings got hurt?" By 2 a.m., her voice was hoarse from screaming into voicemail. "I have worked so damn hard to get where I am. I've sacrificed everything for this job, for this life. And you're going to ruin it all because what? Because I called you ugly at dinner?" At 3:17 a.m. came a moment of clarity. "Julian, please. I know I said some things I shouldn't have, but this is my career we're talking about. My entire future. Can't we work something out? Can't we be adults about this?" The most revealing message came at 5:46 a.m. when her voice had gone flat and exhausted. "I loved you. I actually loved you. And this is how you repay me? By stabbing me in the back the first chance you get? I gave you everything, Julian. I brought you into my world, introduced you to my friends, shared my life with you. And this is how you thank me?" The cognitive dissonance was complete. The woman who'd called me ugly in public, who'd systematically drained my bank account, who'd treated me like an embarrassing accessory she couldn't quite bring herself to get rid of. That woman thought she'd been generous with her affection. A lawyer representing Ashley's firm called Tuesday morning. "This is David Chen from Morrison Klein and Associates. Mr. Morrison asked me to reach out regarding some documentation you provided yesterday evening." Ashley's boss had looked at Sarah's evidence, realized he had a serious problem on his hands, and was now in full damage control mode. "Mr. Morrison wanted me to thank you for bringing certain irregularities to his attention," the lawyer continued. "The documentation you provided regarding Miss Patel and her former employee has been very illuminating. He also wanted to assure you that your cooperation in this matter is appreciated and will be kept confidential." "Is Sarah okay?" I asked, because that was really the only part I cared about. "Miss Chen is fine. In fact, Mr. Morrison has asked me to extend an offer for her to return to the firm in a more appropriate position, with a significant adjustment to her compensation package. Apparently, her work was quite impressive once it was properly attributed." And Ashley? There was a pause that told me everything I needed to know. "Miss Patel's employment status is being reviewed. I'm not at liberty to discuss details, but I can say that Mr. Morrison takes these matters very seriously." Ashley was done. Not just fired, probably being investigated, possibly facing legal action. I packed Ashley's belongings methodically. Expensive face cream from my bathroom medicine cabinet. Designer underwear that cost more per piece than I usually spent on weekly groceries. Yoga mat rolled up in my closet. Everything went into neat boxes, labeled with her name and the date, because even when I'm removing someone toxic from my life, I apparently can't help but be organized about it. I sent one final email to Ashley and her parents. Professional, factual, completely free of emotional language she could twist. "I have arranged for your belongings to be available for pickup at my building's front desk. Regarding the financial discrepancies we discussed on Sunday, I have prepared a repayment schedule for the portions charged to my accounts that appear to have been for personal rather than shared expenses. Going forward, I believe it would be best if future communication is limited to email only." Attached was a spreadsheet that would have made Marcus proud. 3 pages of itemized charges organized by date and category, with a suggested payment plan that worked out to about $400 a month for the next 7 years. Not because I expected to actually see that money, but because putting it in writing established that I understood the difference between gifts freely given and money taken under false pretenses. I also returned the engagement ring to Ashley's grandmother. Yes, there had been an engagement ring, because apparently somewhere in the middle of being systematically drained and publicly humiliated, I'd convinced myself that the solution was to legally bind myself to her forever. The grandmother just smiled sadly and said, "She would have complained it was too small anyway." The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Sarah texted me. "Started my new job today. Corner office, 40% raise, and a boss who reads emails before taking credit for them. Thank you for believing me when I couldn't believe myself." Ashley's social circle imploded as people realized their lifestyle influencer friend was actually a fraud funded by someone else's credit cards. Madison stopped answering calls. Preston deleted their group chat. The podcast canceled Ashley's appearance when Sophia decided she couldn't be associated with whatever drama this was turning into. 3 months later, I'm genuinely happy in a way I'd forgotten was possible. No more anxiety about what mood Ashley would be in when I got home. No more mental calculations about what the evening would cost or what social performance would be expected of me. No more accepting cruelty disguised as affection or mistaking financial manipulation for partnership. I'm dating someone now who thinks I'm actually attractive and splits dinner checks without being asked. She laughs at my jokes instead of at me, treats my job with respect instead of condescension, and has never once made me feel like I should be grateful she's giving me a chance. Funny how much better life gets when you stop accepting treatment you don't deserve. Ashley tried contacting me recently through mutual acquaintances, claiming she'd made mistakes and wanted to work things out. But here's what I learned from this whole experience. When someone shows you who they are through consistent actions over 2 years, believe them. That birthday dinner wasn't a bad moment or an unfortunate misunderstanding. It was finally seeing her clearly without the filters of hope and denial.